Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. We move now from linguistics to writing systems, or to an ethnological approach to both of these at once. I am not a card-carrying linguist, so there will be all kinds of things which I will be very grateful for your help and assistance with in due course. Anyway, let's just get started here. Voiced initials in Thai, in comparative Thai studies. This is a very well recognized phenomenon, and there has been a great deal of scholarly output on the question of voiced initials in Proto-Thai and what happened to them and what they were when they were lost and so forth and so on. So this is a classic question. The remaining voiced initials in this particular area is something that was first mentioned by vernacular in 1948, and subsequently has been a topic of a very great amount of discussion. The area concerned is in the very northernmost part of Vietnam, and the voiced initials are the following, according to the investigations of Ted. The place we're talking about is just up here in this corner of Vietnam. This particular map comes from La Jonquière, and all of these blue areas are those which are inhabited by speakers of either Dai, which used to be called To, or known languages. And the orange part down here is the place which is predominantly ethnic Vietnamese. Here is a map of Cao Bằng, and Trung Khang district is in that part in the far northeast, close to the Chinese border. The vernacular Thai script is one which has been used for centuries. This is something which can be substantiated, and the full paper on which this talk is based is one which investigates readings in early Middle Chinese, that is to say, readings of vernacular characters and standard Chinese characters in traditional texts recited in a traditional fashion. But then there are also other types of readings, Han Viet, and so forth and so on. The text itself is one which was of wedding songs, the very northern part of Trung Khang district itself. And I've recently conducted a study of another text from the same area. So there's something which to serve as a basis for comparison. The wedding songs themselves are very well known. They were published in 1941 by the EFO in Hanoi. Now, the published volume contains a transcription of the text, a transcription into Romanized Dai. On opposite pages, a translation into French, following separately, and then very brief ethnographic notes. There are no word losses. What I had to do is to track the identity of all the morphemes in the text. So this would involve quite a lot of extra work. Actually, it's interesting, there is a Vietnamese translation of the works of William Van Hoy, the author. It was published in 1995. That edition of his works does not have a translation or word losses or anything which are based on the Dai. Rather, the Vietnamese translation is based on the French translation. So that edition is of no help whatsoever in making sense of the text. Here is a sample page. We can see that it looks like Chinese. Lots of the characters will be recognizable as Chinese, but if you try to make sense of this as a Chinese text, you'll find that you do not get very far because it's not representing a Chinese language, but rather a Tiger-Dai language. Now, there are some interesting differences between the wedding songs and the Crossing the Seas text, which I have also investigated. One of them is that in the Crossing the Seas text, which comes from very much the same area, alveolar stops and are not, they are devoiced, they are no longer voiced in that particular representation of the text. In the wedding songs, however, absolutely all of the proto-Thai initials, which were supposed to be voiced, are still represented as having voiced initials. So, okay. As has been pointed out by other scholars quite some time ago, the wedding song lyrics are a mixture of Thai, Vietnamese, and also Han Viet. Han Viet, by the way, Sino-Vietnamese is the, shall we say, standard or official system of pronunciation for Chinese characters, which is taught in the schools in Vietnam. So that's a very important influence. There's also lots of Vietnamese words interspersed with the Thai and everything else. The overall structure, however, of the lyrics themselves are still in Thai. And what we found by looking at the Han Viet representation of all of the Chinese characters and all of the other graphs which had Chinese character components as phonetic components, is that about 37% of all of the total characters in the text were in this represented or pronounced in this Han Viet fashion. So this is a very important aspect of the way in which these songs were sung. For voiced initials, there are some 90 morphemes altogether. They were found across all, as I mentioned before, all major categories of voiced initials in Proto-Thai. And the transcription is based quite clearly on the local pronunciation. It does not conform either to Sabina's 1910 uh, dictionary or any other sources of that kind. Okay, sorry. Okay, what we have in the transcription in the source is the prototype B is represented by V. B is as Peter Alcorn and Kirby have investigated, demonstrated by an instrumental study in the place, is represented by a fricated bilabial initial. So V is the way in which this is most conveniently represented in the script that's used. Script that's used is based on Vietnamese Quoc, the romanization system used for Vietnamese. Okay, you can see that all of the others are similarly represented, except, let's see, prototype in this particular representation is represented by an RI initial. This is idiosyncratic. It was not something that was anything other than the author's attempt to represent the voice, the quality of the voiced initial. Here, the R is meant to be read or pronounced in the Vietnamese fashion. So you have Z, and let's see, DLR is represented also by Z, and so forth and so on. Down further, we have a prototype represented by either Z or Z. These are all, of course, pronounced in the Vietnamese fashion. Now, there's a possible ambiguity in the representation of this particular variety of type, which has to do with the confusion between Vietnamese pronunciations and others. I shan't have time to go into that. You have a handout, and this, I should tell you something about this. The analysis of all of the words represented as having voiced initials in this text are shown in this handout. When we can see here where the source of the voiced initial reading is likely to be. The main ones are early Middle Chinese, Han Viet. Other characters are recent innovations, and I'll talk a little bit further about them. Or they are serial borrowings, that is, characters which are borrowed either semantically or phonetically to represent the Dai words. And the categories are overlapping to a certain extent so that the numbers don't have a certain amount of approximation in them. The figures I've given indicate, however, the number of graphs for which the voiced initials are clearly derived rather than total numbers. So for Han loans, which you'll find on the last page of the handout, there are a total of 8 which show Han Viet readings. But the voiced initials are drawn very clearly only from 4 of those. So that number that I've totted up for Hangul readings in this category is 4 rather than 8, and so on. Anyway, the other thing is convention is that if there are vernacular graphs which include a component which is a standard Chinese character representing a phonetic element, those are shown in parentheses for the Han Viet and so on, the other readings. Well, an overview, topping up all of these examples, what we find is category B, we have a total number of 6. No early Chinese readings, Han Viet 3. Recent innovations. The script, by the way, for the Dai is a mixed script. It has a very old component, and then it has another component which took shape during the 17th century, at the time when the royal court of the Mak dynasty was ensconced in and resident in Cao Bằng. So there was a innovation in the script that was used for Thai that was introduced almost certainly at that time. Now, and then finally, serial borrowings are borrowings from either phonetic or semantic, or both. And then we have other categories. M, we just have one, which is a serial borrowing. And then, let's see, these are all given in the same order as I've listed them in the handout. Okay, further overviews, further figures, what we've got for total number is 88. Sorry, these figures have shifted around. So the early Middle Chinese readings, that is to say the characters from which the representation of the voiced initial was derived, is 35. Han Viet is 19. Okay, recent innovations, 7, and then serial borrowings or complex things are a total of 4. Percentages in each category, 40% for early Middle Chinese. For a text that was continued to be sung in the 1940s, at the very least having a total of 40% of the voiced initials being derived from early Middle Chinese, which dates, as we know from the history of the Chinese script, from the time of the Che-Yun, in other words, around 601 AD CE. This is quite staggering. Now, by comparison, the Han Viet readings are 21%. Taken together, these two categories are 61.4. This is quite something. What this means, we'll have a look at in just a moment. We'll skip the example. Some of the Han loans now, some of them, lots of Han loans in this script also turn out to be words which had voiced initials in Chinese. and they continue to have voiced initials in the Dai pronunciation in this dialect. The word for tea is one of these. Interestingly, these components, your component is here for chan, is also borrowed and used as a phonetic element representing other words with voiced initials. So the next slide shows you an example of that, which is the word for old woman or paternal grandmother, which is combined a female radical plus chan as a phonetic element. So quite clearly voiced initials were a salient aspect of the pronunciation of language in this area, and they were productive of graphic innovation. Okay, now there's also a more recent layer. Shan't worry too much about that. Now, it's well established that the dating of these voiced initials in Chinese was alive and well in 601 at the beginning of the Sui Tang transition. But then by the time of late Middle Chinese, in other words, later during the Tang dynasty, they had disappeared. So disappeared more or less completely. So what we could say definitely is that many of the readings here correspond to early Middle Chinese and not to later Middle Chinese, that is to say of the later Tang dynasty or any subsequent stages in the development of Chinese, or for that matter, any Chinese dialects. There are some Chinese dialects with voiced initials, like Shanghainese, but this is not really a relevant consideration. We checked all of the local dialects for kind of thing. So the relationship with Vietnamese cultural presence in this area only dates really seriously from the 17th century, after the fall of the Mao dynasty. So whether we can proceed on the basis of this correspondence with early Middle Chinese to assigning an early historical date for the origin of these readings is a more complicated question. We would actually want to look at much more than a single text. But nevertheless, this is very important information. Now, as I mentioned before, these voiced initials are clearly culturally salient in the script production and innovation. And also the practices of including these voiced initials or representations of them in the local script also overrode the tendency to script simplification, which were also part of the tradition of continuing this vernacular writing tradition. So these writing practices require a social and cultural base. And the local Dai scholar, Huang Zhuren, has actually adduced evidence from local documentation in Cao Bằng to say that well-connected families in the Cao Bằng area were engaged in studying for civil service examinations from the 4th or 5th centuries onwards. Now, the same was probably true of Dai families and in other parts of the northern part of Vietnam at the same time. Again, this is something which needs to be investigated and confirmed. So this gives one reason to suppose that the whole region, along with the Red River Delta, had become centers of literate culture from a very early age. Now, what is well established, of course, and really beyond doubt, is that the Red River region had become a well-developed center for Buddhist and Brahmanical learning with hundreds of temples by the early centuries of the Christian era, rivaling Luoyang in northern China in the size and number of its temples. So, and translation into Buddhist texts and other texts into Chinese was part of this effort, which was located there in the Red River Valley. So, now further extrapolating from Han Zhuan's argument about the early participation of local families, we might add that the variety of Chinese reading pronunciation selected as a basis for creating this script would naturally have been in line with the then official standard pronunciation at the capital, because these families would want to maximize the chances of their children for examination success. Now, this means in turn that the official standard, as represented in the Cheiyun and other sources, may in fact turn out to be directly relevant to the formation, that is to say, the beginning stages of the script in this area. Okay, so now there are implications here.